When trying to build a more efficient herd, sometimes the best thing we can do is find genetics from someone else who's farther down the road than we are.
And she's going to be taking more feed, more requirements to breed her to be actually genetically smaller, So you're going to have to change your management as well. And so you're going to be feeding this big cow to hopefully get a smaller animal. And so, at some point I think it's just best to trade out your genetics because somebody else will want them cows and just trade them out and then, start over.
But in this journey, we don't need to leave performance out of the equation. But sometimes the things that we select for are not what we would think of as the first thing to select for to improve the performance of our herd.
So like right now, a big selection criteria we're using is actually just mothering ability. We do that at calving time. We're moving. And so if she stays with her calf or takes it the opposite direction when we're moving, because we always move the drop bunch out of the pairs, right? And some cows want to move and they'll come without their calf. Well, those cows I give a negative mothering ability to. Cows that stay or take their calf to the other end, I'll give a positive to. The cows we give a positive mothering ability to have proven over and over again to be above average for weaning weight. Now, are they better milkers? I don't necessarily say that, but it's that calf can be with her and suck 6, 7, 8 times a day versus 2.
All that and more on this episode 478 of the Working Cows podcast with Bart Carmichael, brought to you by the Rogue Food Conference.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. Very excited to be joined today by Bart Carmichael. Bart is a seed stock producer, an educator from north of Faith, South Dakota, and he's been on a great journey of changing his cow herd to be a cow herd that can thrive in their environment. And so I really respect the work that he and Shannon and the whole crew there at Wedge Tent Angus Ranch have done, and wanted to talk to him about genetics today. And he will be a speaker at the Rogue Food Conference February 6th and 7th in Rapid City, South Dakota. And when we look at great managers, the most important thing for us to do is not to imitate their practices, not to learn how to do the things they do. The most important thing we can do in learning to be like other great managers is learning to think the way they think. And so Bart's going to give us a great talk at the Rogue Food Conference on diversity and how the diversity of the landscape and how everything that's out there, and I do mean everything that's out there, is playing a role in helping these things move forward, these landscapes move forward. And if we try to go to war against one specific thing, it ends up being a problem that costs us more money, probably. So if you want to learn how Bart thinks and learn to think like him, then come to the Rogue Food Conference, February 6th and 7th. You can get tickets at roguefoodconference.com. There are many codes you could use. I'll give you 2 of them. Code COWS30 will get you $30 off your ticket. Code WEDGE30 will also get you $30 off your ticket, as in Wedge Tent Angus Ranch. So hope to see you there. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great time to get together and to have our understandings broadened and challenged and deepened and all those things. So look forward to seeing you there. Now, my conversation with Bart Carmichael. Bart, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Hey, good morning, Clay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, first time we've done one of these virtually. You know, we're neighbors, 70 miles or so apart. But anyways, so yeah. first time we've done one of these virtually. So appreciate you jumping on here. But again, I've told Dallas Mount before, I always end up talking to you about people management. And you and I were talking here before we got going this morning that you and I have never, to my recollection, talked about genetics and focused on genetics. And so thought maybe we'd do that today, focus on some genetics and talk about some of the issues related to that. And maybe where we could start is how do people go about changing the genetics that they have to be ones that are better fit their environment? What are kind of what's that process look like? So yeah, take that wherever you want, I guess, and your perspective on how to get started, I guess.
Well, and as we were talking, that change, it has to be something you truly want and what you're looking for. Because we've had people that, want to change genetics, but don't change their management or anything like that. So it goes hand in hand. And as we're talking about change, I said last year, somebody asked the question, well, how do you learn this stuff? And I said, well, the more you change, the more you'll learn. The more you learn, the more you'll change. And I believe that even in the genetic side, as we learn and go about, and, we've worked really close with Steve, and Steve's worked really close with us. And it's fun now that something will come up and he'll call me or I'll call him. And things are always changing. And so the people involved, I always said, no matter what, if you're changing your cattle, you have to be proud of what you produce. So if it's not in your mindset to raise 450 to 500 pound calves, that you will never be happy there. So, you have to be happy with what you're selling and accept that. So the relationships there are all part of it. But making that change to cattle that fit your environment. I know the first deal is, we started out, we just yanked the rug out from under our cows, because they don't need that. We've been told this. And man, when you yank on a rug, things tend to fall down, And so then we had to put it back under them. And what I learned over time and bringing in cattle is we can move that rug. And if the cattle are adaptable and fit your environment, they will step off of it. And then they'll fit the program. And so there's a give and take there, as far as what is your environment and some people are willing to replace this part of their environment, some are not. So just had a phone call with a producer down in Nebraska the other day about even line breeding. And she was like, well, the purists will say, well, low input people have a purist side too, and so we're not going to do any of this, or we'll do a little bit of this, or, so everybody has their niche and the spot, that and actually fits their environment. But if we're, cause I always said, well, we're not running deer and antelope either, so they can't just jump the fence and go get something they need. So we have to manage in between what is in our pasture and what we're managing for. So if I'm on a 2-day move and I don't have enough nutrition in there, then that's my job to make up that difference, but now we don't want to overfeed them, and we want to graze as many days out of the year as we can. So,
yeah, talk to me about the balance between, not starving profit into the business and, also not overdoing it, not having too many inputs.
Yeah, because we did that. We tried to do that, starve profits into it. And I was partnered with my dad at the time, and he actually asked me, are you trying to get us all broke or what, And there was a line there that we had crossed, and we were trying to change the grazing management as well at the same time. And so it's just knowing what is needed, as long as the cow, and I always say, 80% of that is probably just keeping their belly full. But if we're grazing down too short, or we're in a spot that they can't get to it, or like now we got covered with snow and it turned to ice and kind of opened back up yesterday, well, we have to make sure they can get to that feed, And so whether it's moving them to bale grazing or something like that, there's just things we all know as ranchers, I guess, really. It's not like a special talent, but to know that they need fed, But on the other side, they don't need every supplement in the world, and they don't need to be body condition 6 all winter long either, We actually, the way I look at it is nature in itself in the season, what was created for cows. I'm using my hands if you can't see, but things aren't made to gain weight in the wintertime, really. I mean, that's just the season of it. So spring, summer flush, we want cattle that can put on weight right then real easy, put it in the bank, use it as their bank account. We get to, from now until February, this is when the withdrawal is made, but we still need to know what them cattle are should look like, what we need, and have to just make sure they're fed, whether hopefully that's grazing, but if it gets too thick and too icy and they can't get through it, or if you're out of feed, which hopefully shouldn't happen if you're managing right. But yeah, it's just a balancing act. We overdid it and we knew it. Learned a few lessons. Worked with a few guys further north from here, and they'd call every year, and they'd yank the rug out too. And once you yank the rug out, it's hard to want to put it back, because once you go no cost, it's okay to be low cost, but you go no cost, then you need to get some deer and antelope. But once you do that, you need to it's really hard to want to put it back. I've been there. You don't want to put that expense back, But like now, with our grazing management and genetics, it's running us paying fair market value lease, about 75 cents a day to run a cow, on grass. That is real life savings. I mean, that's, I've done the math on some guys, so overdoing it. If you just go straight into all feeding, I've done some math on what hay costs a couple years ago, $4.50 a day, if we have to supplement some in between there a little bit, I have a lot of room from 75 cents, to $2 even. So,
Right. Yeah. So that genetics change process, don't jerk the rug out from under them. Do move it and see which ones step off.
Yes. Yep. Start moving it. And, that's just like this. So 15 years ago, it was a dry year, couple dry years. We needed to back off on some cow numbers. I knew that. So we went from 60-day breed to a 45-day breed. Well, we didn't just cut it short. We took some off the front and some off the back. And I think our open rate was like 10%. So it wasn't near as big as we even hoped for. We culled some cows. But what was interesting there is we lost a couple cow families. So you talk about genetics and how that fulfills the role is, so the grandma cow, 3 of her daughters and 5 of her granddaughters were all open that year. So a dry year shortened up their breeding season, and we never looked back. So we've kept breeding at that, our heifers are on a short breed. This year we left them a little bit longer, but usually we're on a 35-day breed. This year we didn't get them pulled. We were busy that week, so they were 42 days. But so our cows are set up. We mass breed them day one, and that's just us seed stock, trying to keep them sires current or old bulls, I guess I really should say, keep them up there. But then we wait 2 weeks and we turn the bulls in for 30 days. So, and talking about genetics, and fertility is number one profit. I mean, feed costs, we kind of talked about that. That's 70% cost, running the cow. The next big one, and really is the biggest profit indicator, is fertility. Well, so when we started that heifer deal, 30-day breed, the first year was like 60% bred. Well, 40% open. That's not like, nobody calls to brag about that, And but it is genetic. It's inheritable. It's the cow that, and even if they want to argue what goes into it, it's the cow that can keep her condition, the cow that can do better, whatever. But, the first year we were 60% bred, then the second year we were 60% bred. And that hurts, and it makes you kind of question what you're doing. The third year, have a few of them heifers off the first time that produce calves start getting in there. We move up to 65% bred. Not a big deal. The third year, 75% bred. Um, 85, 95. We backed it off to 21 days for a while when we started getting hit in 95. And we get back to 75, 80. This year we were 14% open on our heifers, So, you start locking them genetics in. Our running age cow herd, 3 to 15-year-old cows were 2% open, just phenomenal, and it's like, and last year they were 4%. And the year before that, they were 2.5%. Well, I used to have it in my mind that I wanted 10% open, because they were pushing that envelope. And so if it cost us too much money to have less than that, and that was kind of one of our indicators. If we had more than that, we were too hard on them. Less than that, we weren't hard enough on them. Well, now it's to the point where we've got the genetics working for us and things are working in the system. Now I could say it's just going to be this way all the time. We know that's not true. Next year we could have a rack, But what we've seen over time is with the same, and we don't have to keep pushing all the time to keep getting 10% out. Now they're breeding up more. Now we can go for something else, and so, which is fantastic, it's a fun feeling to have.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. So you what were the steps? What was the process like for you guys? Was the shortening of the breeding season on the heifers, challenging them, was a major part of that? What were some other parts of that process?
Yeah, it was challenging them, but we've also learned too that, we still, same thing, back to that cow that was grazing, and make sure they're taken care of. We don't want to starve them, because then you start selecting for something else, A few years ago, it was really dry, and you could almost see it was actually some of the poor lighter heifers that actually made it through the summer and got bred, because our grazing was so hard on them that we couldn't select for anything that, nature wasn't selecting for anything bigger than that. So your management is going to dictate your genetics. Form follows function. Well, what are you actually asking them to function in? So a cow in New Mexico looks a lot different than a cow here, because of just natural environment. And so we can push for that cow here if we're just grazing way too hard, trying to get them to eat absolutely everything. And I'm a non-selective grazer, so don't hear me wrong, because I'm really big into that. But just getting them to eat down to nothing and then finally moving them, the other side of that, if you're overdeveloping your heifers, getting too much fat on them, whatever, then they're not going to breed as well, and you're selecting for an animal that's not going to make it in your environment either. And the epigenetics, what's getting turned on and off, is really amazing to me. It's kind of like a new study, but an old study, but it's just amazing, because that heifer that was really produced in really good conditions, and we took care of every need she ever has, when she gets bred, the triggers that DNA basically said, this tells this calf, this is an easy place to live. You don't need this. You don't need the survivability, things like that. Well, on the other side, if we just totally starve them to death and try to select for that, going from one extreme to the other, it's like, this is a really, really harsh place to live. Don't plan on getting very big, uh, heart girth, everything, is changed just because of that management, from that cow being bred and what your management is, why she's bred. So it's that's really fun to me.
Yeah. I appreciate that. The epigenetic side of it, it's possible to ask too much of them, or challenge them in a way that's not fair or whatever, and then they are stunted because of it. Basically, is what I hear you saying.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And basically that word stunted is the right word, because we've seen it, and then I bought a set of heifers one time that were overdeveloped, and actually my dad bought them for me. So, but anyway, I thought they would fall right out of our program. No, those heifers did not. They didn't fall out of our program because they were developed around the corner, per se. The problem is, and that's where the epigenetics come in, is even bred to bulls that fit our program that have lots of daughters in the herds, them cows could not produce a daughter to replace themselves. And that's where the epigenetics come in. They were themselves were fed around the corner, and they made it, and they were surviving in our program, but their genetics could not reproduce here. I mean, they were doing it, but then the next generation could not. And so
it sounds to me like your management matters at least as much as the actual genetics, like, because epigenetics is our management mixed in with the environment and all these things, right? Then is that the faster way to make a change in your mind? Is change your management, and then maybe the way to exponentially make an impact is change your management and bring in genetics that fit your environment, or have genetics that fit your environment?
yeah, and it's a both thing. It's like we said earlier, it's managing the whole, because if you're going to just change your management with a cow herd that has the wrong genetics, that's going to hurt, So you start moving that rug, and they're going to start falling out. You start changing your grazing management, they're going to start falling out, because just not all genetics in the whole are made for what we do for the intensive grazing, the grazing all year long. They're just not. No matter how epigenetically you want to say it's them genetics are just not going to work. Now, the epigenetic side has an advantage if you start changing for your home base, but if your cow herd is too far to the left, it'll take too many generations to get it right. So yeah, and if you're taking an 1,800-pound cow and trying to make a 1,200-pound cow, that's a diminishing return. You're going to be feeding a 1,800-pound cow to produce a smaller calf, and they really won't be on the first generation, but trying to get to that smaller cow is really a hard sell for me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because so you're going to be changing your management as you change for this 1,200-pound cow, or whatever numbers, just throw numbers out. But so you're feeding the too big a cow that's wrong, and she's going to be taking more feed, more requirements to breed her to be actually genetically smaller, So you're going to have to change your management as well. And so you're going to be feeding this big cow to hopefully get a smaller animal. And so, at some point I think it's just best to trade out your genetics, because somebody else will want them cows, and just trade them out and then, start over. But that being said, that's not for everybody, because if you got a cow herd you just want to improve on, those cows that are there have the epigenetics for your management, your ranch, so they're going to change easier. So, I mean, it all depends on the situation, but it's always the whole, because once you start learning and changing and learning, you're going to be starting to do things different. So here's where our management comes in. Here's where our genetics come in. Here's where the people come in. Like I said earlier, you have to be proud of what you're producing. And so it's a cycle, and it's all got to fit together,
Yep. Talk to me about staying adaptable in developing heifers, or that's just one example, but you talked about, if everything is going well environmentally, you've got, like we had this year, good rain and rain that lasts and lasts and lasts, versus 2021 and 2022, how do you stay adaptable in that regard so that you kind of still get that consistent heifer developed that thrives in your environment?
So same year. So in 19, it rained a bunch. It was wet. We just kind of stayed on our same rotation, which we left a lot of grass. It pretty much stopped raining after that, 21 to 24, there was some rain in there, but I mean, them were dry years. So we had some bank from our leftover grass from 19 through 20. So then we're changing, being adaptable, knowing what our stocking rate is, I do a forage inventory twice a year on my place to know how much grass I have and when, and looking forward to the next 6 months, basically. And so, we had been selling down some cows. So this year was a total flip-flop. And I think in the drought, I don't even think there has to be much said there about what you're selecting for, because it's putting stress on them, and we're rotating and trying to graze through it. Now this year, like you said, it rained and rained and rained. Well, I sold or moved 50 head of cows in March because we were dry. I mean, a month later, we were having our bull sale, and I'm thinking, I need to sell another 50 head of cows. This is not good. By Mother's Day, we're getting rain, and it never stopped. So like us on this year, we were actually short some cows, but so we just actually fenced them tighter. So we measure our forage. We know what we need. Things lasted longer. We probably could have done something. I'm not sure what at the time, brought in some stalkers or something to fill, but we just tightened the cows up, so we're still putting selection on them and making them graze it down, but they're not staying anywhere, any one place too long, maybe 2 days. But it required more fencing from us this year. So we had to, build more fences to keep them tighter, to keep them from backtracking. And, so that moving forward, that's, we were able to keep pressure on cows that way, and calves, of course, when Pat and I always say, it's like, well, you need to fix this, so we'll change this. Well, you change 4 things before you're done, so you're not sure exactly what worked, So, there are several things we did this year that I'm excited about, but, we've been doing the mineral water and for the last several years, and that seems to be kicking our breed up, which I think is improving our epigenetics, which is letting our genetics shine through. We started with Ellen stuff last year, and then really whole hog went with it this year. And so, and then it rained. So which one was the real big kicker? And we got 25 years of breeding for 45 days behind us, and selection for that all makes a difference genetically as well. So now, was it one thing in particular, or was it everything lining up for us on one year? So, that things were really good. So,
yeah. Earlier, we talked about the illustration of yanking the carpet versus moving it. Can you give me some examples? I think we talked about the breeding season. What would be an example maybe of a negative of yanking it, taking it too fast, too far? What would that be?
Yeah. So when we first did it, we cattle should survive off what you have to provide, right? That was kind of the mindset. And So we pulled mineral. We pulled all the porons. We grazed, and it had to be a blizzard before we'd ever supplement or feed anything, So it was just, we just took all the crutches away from them just right now, just boom, And went a few years like that, which I see positives in it, but the thing is, you can cool yourself down to a perfect cowherd and she'll be the only cow you have left, be pretty hard to make money. Monty Howery told me one time, he said, he gave me a few bits of advice, and he was helping me when we first got started on the purebred deal, but he said, any fool can cull himself to a perfect cowherd. He said, it takes some vision and ingenuity to build the perfect cowherd. And so we kind of looked at it that way. We're big cullers, but we're trying to build the cowherd. And so we yanked all that stuff out from under them. Breed ups went down, calf weights went down, of course, you lose a cow or two, not paying attention to body condition, and you learn that, hey, there is things here happening, like, say, mineral in particular. What is the mineral status of our ground? All ground's not created equal. We fenced them in here, so, they can't go to the river to go to a salt lick or, something. Somewhere there's something different. So we put them here. So what is the mineral content? So then we went back with a custom mineral and, was on that for quite a while. Then I met Steve and we pulled mineral again. And, cause we went with the total salt deal. Well, then, and that was working. But then there was things that we knew we were short here and we checked for and we're seeing in our cattle we were adding. So we actually went back to our custom mineral, but we resampled everything. And our custom mineral deal is 1 ounce a day. And so I mix that in about 5 ounces of C90 now. And so that way they're mostly getting the C90 that they need, but they're getting that little bit that I know I'm short in my pasture that offset any imbalances, So, just little things like that, like that mineral program doesn't cost us much at all, So that's one of the things where we didn't need to yank it out from under them. We just needed to fine tune it and know what was needed there versus just feeding a generic off the shelf deal where we're feeding, phosphorus that we don't need, in our mineral deal, we only have like 4 or 5 ingredients in it, and like phosphorus is expensive and it's not one of them. We have that here.
Yeah.
So,
what are you sampling to develop that?
So we're sampling the grass, and there's been people that say, well, test the soil. Well, what is this? What's available in the soil? What are the plants actually bringing up? So that's what we're testing for the cattle purposes. We actually go out and just clip, and I'll take a handful here from a handful there and go through and them are pretty expensive tests. So we're not doing that all the time, but we building a database, off that. But we're actually testing the grass because that's what's needed for the cow.
Yep. What would you do different going back? How would you go through that process differently now?
Well, I would have just tried to start moving that rug, and we all get a little overachieving, I guess, and like I said, we just stopped all of it. And I'll pick a day. I don't know. October 15th, we were done with everything, and so I wouldn't have been so harsh because we were hard on a lot of cattle. I lost a lot of cattle that I bought that fell out, which were, we proofed our cow herd up to a great place now, but I think we could have got there a lot easier, a lot economically, a lot more sound if we would have just started moving the rug instead of just taking it all away from them, and, breeding season, we changed that and we kept changing that. I would have probably liked likely more move that all in one deal, but that's a tough one. I've talked to people where little adjustments are fine, but all of it's played a part though.
Yeah. And what would be some of the things that you would do the same, or give me some examples of the things that you wouldn't do that you did?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I would have, and so this is something I wouldn't have done, but I'm going to talk about what I would have done. Would have got into the grazing management more and faster. We were trying to make the cowherd first, which you got to have the right cow, but I always hate the analogy of the chicken or egg, which come first, because God created the chicken. That's a simple answer for me. But if we would have been working on our grazing management more, that would have been a better step for our cows too. We were trying to graze them and make things happen, and there's grass over here. They should go get that, and well, that's not always their deal. They get selective too. And so, because we started back in 93 and then started developing the cowherd almost right away. Well, then it was, our management was changing as far as the pastures went, but it was not until 2012 that we didn't totally dive into it, because that was a super drought year.
Mm-hmm.
And rained like 1/10 of an inch or so. And so that's when we really dove into the grazing management, and that was out of necessity, So Dave Pratt says, about the handwriting on the wall and
Yeah.
their backs up against it. Well, we were there and we needed to learn it, and we did. But the kids had all kinds of tools for building fence, built and invented. But if I could do something different, it would have been that grazing management. I would have tried to start learning that earlier, and so that I could manage my genetics better, back to that cow, and I would have got around the right people. Another thing I would have done, I always have a hard time talking about things I wouldn't do again or shouldn't do again, because them are just life experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can always see what you should have done, or I do. That's how the other thing is try to get my mentor group bigger earlier, and try to find the right people, which, again, how do you know? But, we first met Wayne Berry, and he come here and did a grazing workshop for us, and that was become a great mentorship over the years, and he just passed away here a month ago, and him and I talked pretty much every month for the last 15 years, so, but then like now working with Steve. So you got to have the people around you to bounce ideas off of, to see things, people that are educated more than you, to help guide you,
And I think it's also important to have people that are behind you coming up, because teaching people, you learn as much from teaching people as you do from asking questions of people who are teaching you, right?
Yep. I said at one time at our bull sale, I said, find a mentor and be a mentor, so, yeah.
Yep, for sure. So one of the things that you said early on was that it's always changing. And I think I wonder, from your perspective, if genetics are like soil health. We really don't know how well adapted these animals can be, right? Like, we don't really know how good the soil can get.
Right.
And we don't really know how well adapted these animals can be. Is that true from your experience?
I think so, because as we're going by, it's just the cattle just keep getting better and better. Now, what is better, right? Are weaning weights going up? No. But they're getting more consistent. Their breed up's getting better. They take less supplement. Things are getting better all the time there. And I think as we're selecting for them genetics and building our epigenetics, that just goes hand in hand. And, I've heard people talk about, well, I don't have enough lifetime to build the perfect cow, so I'm just going to trade cattle. And that's fine. My goal, I guess, has always been to try to find that cow. No, I don't want to cull down to her. I want to build a bunch like her, and we ID cows all the time. That I remember back when we did quit, say, mineral and supplement, I had one cow in particular that you never seen any mineral, and she wouldn't come to cake. And so I managed for her, well, which is, not terrible, but I wanted a whole herd of her. So how do we build her, And so, but yeah, so it's just a cautionary thing of not trying to starve the profit into the business, but yet don't let be excuse that you're just supplementing and feeding all the time, because you need to just, it's kind of like the grazing management. I say, if you're grazing 6 months out of the year and feeding 6 months out of the year, so let's just start moving that needle. You don't have to go to 12 months, and that's what we tried to do. We tried to just go to 12-month grazing with the cows we had. That's where the mistake was made. Well, let's try to learn some management and get it out to 8 months or 10 months. Well, once we get to there, and that's where part of that ever-changing is then 10 months to 11 months, your change is going to get smaller, but it's going to get more fine-tuned. And so pretty soon you're out to 12 months. Well, where are you going to go from there? Well, it might just be more cattle selection at that point if we can get around to 12 months. And that's ever changing, because every year is different, right? We've been down to, I think the shortest we've ever did is we fed hay for 2 weeks, what I would consider full feed for 2 weeks. And then we were back to grazing. And you never know where that's going to be. So being adaptable, I just told Kenny, our son, the other day, it was the 6th of December. Well, here a few years ago, we started feeding hay the 6th of December. And I was not happy because, storm moved in, we had to start feeding hay, and it's only December. But everybody had to feed hay on the 6th of December. It was just that way. Well, by the 10th of January, we were back to grazing. It had opened back up. We could go. The cows were grazing. Well, a lot of people didn't. They were just in the routine of feeding, so they fed the rest of the winter. So that's where having that adaptability built into them cattle, that they could do that, because they didn't just stand by the gate then, and wait for you to come. They went and grazed, and so then we also learned in our management as grazing management, we're moving cows all through the winter too. It's not that, it's not just a spring thing or anything like that. It's a year-round deal. And when snow gets deep, tighter we have them, the better it works, because they can work as a team, instead of trying to venture off to the top of the hill to find something and get sore-footed. And, and so now they're, you get 100, 200 bottom plow all going at the same time, they can work in unison, and nobody seems to get sore-footed, but we're also selecting for feet. So, but everything as a whole, if you just change one thing, the grazing management, you're still going to have some stickiness. If you just change the genetics, you're still going to have some stickiness, things around there. And I'm trying to say that in an encouraging way, because I don't want to say, well, you can't do this, but you can, but it will affect everything. So it's always give and take and tug and pull, as far as what this needs or what that needs or what the relationships need or what the management needs. And we haven't really got into genetics yet. It's all been just how everything ties together. But, yeah.
Kind of give me a snapshot of where it is now. And we talked about the fertility side of it, right? And the breed up and how it is improved over time. Is that the best indicator for you? Is, these cows are working as close to 365 days a year as we can get, and they're they're still breeding up at a high level?
It's an indicator. It's not everything though, because then, after that, then, we got phenotype that, starting to select for this, and even performance. And, we've kind of been told we don't need to breed for performance, right, on the grass side. Well, and I'm not saying it's something we chase, by no means. Don't hear me wrong there. But there is some cattle that are better than others,
Yep.
And so we're looking at, every year we ultrasound our cows, we weigh all the calves, we weigh all the cows, take their body weight against the calf's body weight against the cow. So we're selecting for that percentage of body weight, So we're looking there for a cow, Bondsman says 40 to 60% body weight, which I've always questioned, when is that? Because then he talks about 10-month weaning and a lot of Americans were 6-month numbers, but what I've really learned is, so you get a big cow, we'll just throw out, say 1,500 pounds off grass. She's not even going to come close to 50% of her body weight. It's going to be in that 30 to 35%. Might be a big calf,
right.
But without the inputs, her body just can't do that. Now you take the other extreme, say 1,000-pound cow, she can be 50% of her body weight, and relatively easy. But what we're actually looking for in that is size matters, but also it's the cow that can have enough body condition score to get herself through and bred and raise a good calf, say at 50%. So if we get a cow that's weaning off 60%, now we need to, 60% is the extreme. So let's go 65 or 70%. We've had them do it. Well, then we're got to pay attention to that cow, because she's probably not going to keep enough on her back to breed back. If she does, we got a phenom, she's really weaning something big and she's breeding back. That's great. Well, on the other extreme to that, if we're taking relatively or the same cut size of cow and we're going down to that 35%, 40% even, we have a cow that's putting way too much on her back and not enough in her calf, and back to that, cows are the season itself, winter's not for gaining weight. Well, we need her to be able to take some off, put some on. I call them kind of like an accordion a little bit. But so if we have a cow that can be in that 50% range, we know she's producing enough to milk to raise a good calf, but yet keeping enough on her back to breed back, if we get on the lower end, we know that she's too easy keeping, which sounds weird, but she's just fat, probably heavy fronted, not as wedgy. She's going to be a little more boxcar type cow. And then if you go on the other side of that to the extreme over 60, she's going to be a little frailer looking and, lighter made, but she's got the genetics to produce, but she's just not putting anything on her back, And so
could it be that selecting for that cow that is on the upper extreme of percentage of her body weight weaned would have negative consequences down the road? Do you think you'd get?
I believe so. Infertility,
right?
And actually, what it's going to cost you to run that cow, because then you're going to start trying to maintain her body condition. And, if I have one or two cows in tough body shape, that maybe those cows just need to go to town. Now, so that's kind of your indicator change there now. But if I have 80% of my cow herd looks terrible, that's probably on me, and even if they're the wrong genetics, it's still on me because I need to take care of them.
Right.
So,
So you alluded to phenotype. What are some of the things that you're looking at on the cow herself to give you an indication? And is it kind of we're going to pick this one over that one when it comes time to cull or whatever the case may be? Are there some of those indicators that you're looking at for those decision-making helps, or how's that working?
At this point, we're not selecting one over the other because we're letting them breed, but things we're looking for, signs of butterfat, like the escutcheon in the milk mirror in the back, if you would call it, And you can see that from day one when a heifer calf is born on what that looks like and what her milk is going to be like, and
that's just so I'm make sure I'm on the same page. That's a swirl in the hair coat on both sides of the below the vulva, kind of about halfway down the leg, and it's slanted in if it's high butterfat. Is that what we're looking at there?
Yeah, so it goes from the vulva down to the udder, and the hair kind of all runs the wrong opposite direction, I guess you'd call it. Now and it can look several different ways. It doesn't even, some of them won't even reach the vulva. They might only go halfway up or something. And yeah, as it tips in, so it should look like a sand shovel, which is kind of level, but you want it to tip in towards the handle. That means they have more butter fat. If it tips away, it's less butter fat. But if that handle running up to the vulva from the udder is wide, they're going to have more butter fat and stay in milk longer, And so you can get to 10 months, and some, like the adrenal world and on top of the cow, indicates how long they'll be in milk too, So some cows only stay in milk 6 months or 4 months, It's crazy to learn that kind of stuff. And then cows that can milk 12 months out of the year, And so we're looking for things like that to be indicators of our performance, our weaning weight, stuff like that, without added cost, So it's not that we're anti-growth; it's that we want as much growth as we can get for nothing, or for very little input, and do it naturally. And just like last summer, breeding for these things, the adrenal whirl, pointed pole, the discussion, all these things that high butter fat, tender meat, and then here comes marbling, like as far as an EPD goes, our cattle rate very low as far as carcass numbers, yet the heifers we just finished went 97% choice and better, so.
And the carcass on your cattle, I would guess the carcass issues, from the EPD perspective would be related to size and shape. Is that right?
Well, yeah. And then marbling. So, like Dick Diven used to talk about when a cattle is performing. So, and it's a lot of like the grass genetics are on grass. So if that cattle isn't gaining, like 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of body weight per day at 2/3 of its mature weight, if it's not gaining that tissue becomes connective tissue, and nature is telling it it's going to be a breeding animal. So it doesn't need marbling. Well, if it's really gaining, over that point, now it's starting to put on fat, and nature's kind of telling it, programming it that you're going to be 8, it's, and it does work that way. And so like when we're studying these things and looking at growth rates and what we're pushing for, and so we're developing bulls off forage only to be breeding animals. So we want them to breed breeding animals. So then somebody does ultrasound or whatever on them, sends it in. It doesn't look as good, because they're going to be a breeding animal, not a feeding animal, So I think that's where a lot of discretionary lies in that confusion, I guess.
Yeah. So, and the discussion that's discussed in Francois Guinon's milch cow, is that right? Or are there other places?
As far as I know, that's only in the milch cow. I guess Steve talks about it, but
right.
Milch cow, but that's really old stuff. And I mean, it's, if you really don't like reading, don't go by the book, because it's really dry, but it's really good information.
Yep. And just to kind of whet people's appetite, Francois Guinon awarded basically a lifetime salary by France because of the things that he, and just thinking back to what was going on at that time, right? Like everybody or the majority of people had a milk cow, and so this was like life-changing to be able to say, hey, we can pick a milk cow based on looking at the way she's conformed and her hair coat, and say she's going to stay in milk longer, she's going to have higher butter fat, and so it was literally life-changing for a lot of people in that country to have that information and be able to select those cows, and you're not just blindfolded throwing darts, and hoping you find a good one.
And it all proved out, and it was so life-giving, I guess, for those people that's why it was awarded that salary, and
right.
state.
So what are so we got the escutcheon and sloped in. There's two on either side of the legs. There's a set of hair whorls that you want them to slope towards the udder. If they slope away from the udder towards the outside of the legs, that's lower butterfat and less desirable. And then you also said you want that hair whorl basically to be farther apart, wider, right?
Yep. The wider, the better, all the way up. Yep.
Yep.
The better it is.
Okay.
The more butterfat.
And then the adrenal hair whorl, that's at the top of the cow, you said?
That's on the top, up by the shoulders. Yep.
Okay. And what are we looking for there?
So there we want it as far forward as we can, so in front of the shoulders, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to stay in milk longer. If it's some cows, you'll see it might be in the middle of their back, but it'll be way back, and so we want that adrenal whorl moved way up, up on the neck if we can. So, and with that, then the whole conformation of the cow, guys have heard Steve's red solo cup cow,
Yep.
But we want her wedgy and shapy and, her flank bigger than her heart girth, so that's a sign of milk production, It's actually a sign of easy keeping, but it actually becomes a sign of milk production when, I grew up dairying, so they put me on the dairy team, and that's one of the things I learned, I didn't like it, didn't want to be there. But also then vertical folds, So in that escutcheon, there should be a lot of vertical folds. That's higher butterfat even yet. Along the ribs, vertical folds.
And are all these things visible in a younger animal?
The vertical folds not as much. The escutcheon absolutely, in the adrenal whorl is identified as the day they're born. Yeah.
And to you, that's an indicator, not a selection criteria. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're not selecting for it yet, and I say yet because the further we go, kind of one of them deals. What we don't know, what you're talking about, soil health, and we're just chipping the iceberg. As things get better and, we can start selecting for more things, that'll become a selection tool for us as well. Right now, it's an indicator in what things we're looking for. And sometimes right now it's an explanation. If I do have a 2-year-old or something that doesn't have as good calf or something, and then I look and it's like, oh, well, I should have never kept her probably, and I can see some of those things.
Yep. And just so people don't, I don't really care if people think we're crazy necessarily, but I do want people to know that all of these things are knowledge that previous generations had. Yeah. And I want to give you an example from the Bible. Genesis chapter 18, verse 7, and Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and hastened to prepare it. That's 18:7. So he was able to identify, as I think the first session of Steve Campbell's class that you had him come and do, he was able to identify tender and flavorful beef on the hoof.
Yep.
Abraham was.
Yeah.
And so it's possible. And it was common knowledge in those days, but we've forgotten it. But it's still there if we know how to look for it.
Because the other day somebody asked me, we were at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition event, and somebody asked me where we learn this stuff. And I said, well, it's really not about learning anything new. We're learning it new. But it's actually what it is it's forgotten knowledge, And just like that, Abraham could identify the tender calf, and we were actually talking about vinegar at that point. And you can find lots of scripture about vinegar too.
Yeah.
But gut health and whatnot. But it's things that our ancestors knew, they used. And as we've gotten more tech savvy, And that's one of the things that concerns me, is that we're not too reliant on tech and not forgetting what a cow should be, not forgetting what our grass should be, not forgetting what our relationship should be. So they all go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the further we go along, we start relying more and more on technology. I think a lot of that gets forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said we're not selecting for it yet. What would be next, or what are the things that have captured your attention right now in your own cow herd?
Oh, man. Really the shape. So like right now, a big selection criteria we're using is actually just mothering ability. And so, but what we're noticing with that, what I'm selecting for with mothering ability is we do that at calving time. We're moving. And so if she stays with her calf or takes it the opposite direction when we're moving, because we always move the drop bunch out of the pairs, right? And some cows want to move and they'll come without their calf. Well, those cows I give a negative mothering ability to. Cows that stay or take their calf to the other end, I'll give a positive to. The cows we give a positive mothering ability to have proven over and over again to be above average for weaning weight.
Right.
Now, are they better milkers? I don't necessarily say that, but it's that calf can be with her and suck 6, 7, 8 times a day versus 2,
Yeah, and that's Tom Knopfsinger, right? I mean, he talks a lot about that, about them being able to have multiple small meals a day.
Yep. And so also with that what we're noticing too is those cows also have the escutcheon mirror, and it looks really nice on them. So there's things that are going hand in hand there that are really exciting to see, that you can see that these really good cows have that escutcheon and got vertical folds in it, and it's really shiny. And so as we move forward and hopefully we get to marketing, Shannon's dream is to really market females versus just bulls. So, hopefully as we move forward in that and we can have more of them, then we're going to be selection criteria for us to move forward and to improve our own cow herd. So,
yeah. Very good. Well, you and I could talk all day.
Yeah, we know.
But we both got things that we need to do today, probably. So I think I'm going to have to wrap it up. But I do appreciate the time, and we're looking forward to having you with us at the Rogue Food Conference in February of 2026.
Yeah.
And we will have links in the show notes page how people can get tickets to that, and people can pick your brain there in person.
Great. Thank you, Clay.
Thanks for your time, Bart.
Yep. Talk to you later. We'll have to continue this.
Yeah. Very good stuff there. As always, I really appreciate Bart and what he's doing. He's one of the guys that challenges me the most as far as what they've been able to do there on that ranch. And one of those guys that I look, he's a decade or two ahead of me in this journey. And I just keep on seeing, hey, this is what's possible if you stick with it. And that's one of the benefits that he's played in my life, and really appreciate that. So coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, we will be talking to Adam Lash. And Adam Lash has a way of thinking that I think is really helpful. And I really do appreciate his perspective. And just, again, more important to understand how he thinks than it is to understand how he manages. And if we can start to think like him, then we can manage in a way on our landscape that is in sync with nature. And so looking forward to sharing this conversation with Adam with you. And we're talking to him about the advantages that the first generation operators have versus the multi-generational ranch or the big time operator, and how their advantages and how to maximize those advantages and how to take advantage of those advantages. If you find yourself in that scenario, it's going to be a helpful conversation. I look forward to sharing it with you real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.